All right, hello everybody, wherever you might be joining us from. This is John Wilson and Armando Berdiel from Seattle City Lights Lighting Design Lab. Joining you for a quick online tutorial. We are going to talk to you about how to use these really great network lighting control learning guides that LDL developed in partnership with the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance and member utilities. So thanks to everybody involved. This came together as part of a vision of people talking, identifying where do we need little touch points to complement conversations we're trying to have, or where we see challenges arising in the market. How can we better support people who take our classes so when they leave our classes, they have something they can reference when they're having a conversation with a customer. So that's how we put these together. We're going to jump right in, starting with where to find these. Where do they live? Well, you can see we're on Lighting Design Lab's website. And if you go from our home page right to this resources page, you'll see they're right here at the top alongside other awesome resources we have, like our online classes, this great video we made with featuring LLC, and the Network Lighting Control Learning Guide. So we're going to jump right into them. They're all accessible as PDFs. And Armando, where do you think we should start?
I believe ensuring that we're all on the same page with the same terms. So it says control text terms. Perfect place to start.
Yeah, let's open that up. These are available. You can download these or just access them online as a PDF. So, the thing I love about this three-pager, this is the only one that's a three-pager, is that it's broken up in that it starts by identifying the specific component. It then goes on to talking about basic controls terminology. And once you understand those two concepts, it goes on to explain what network lighting control means relative to luminaire level lighting control. Now, I just skipped over a ton of stuff, but Armando, can you kind of explain what that means?
Sure, definitely. And it's very common in the lighting industry that the same concept or the same piece of hardware has multiple names associated with it. We want to ensure that these things are standardized, as well as what we're going to define them, what they are, how does it do it, and a little bit of just notes to help further understand what this concept is. And we talk a little bit about the luminaire driver, as well as the load controller, gateways, servers, so it increases in complexity. But again, great resource to understand, be on the same page with these pieces of hardware and what they do.
How often is the confusion, simply because we're saying the same thing, but we're using different words, right?
Listen, sometimes people use driver and load controller interchangeably, and I like that we just lay them out and then we can really explain the points of, hey, this is one thing, this is the other thing, and this is how they work together.
Yeah, exactly. This table right here, it tees up again. This is a great example. Some of those terms that sometimes can muddy up the waters. Sometimes we say things that mean one thing, but it encompasses more than that. So great opportunity to kind of sharpen the pencil. And if you've ever wondered yourself, like I've heard people use this phrase, what exactly do they mean? It can help you ask questions. It can help you clarify, maybe if you're in a conversation, right? That's part of how this could be used.
Yeah, especially even just calling out, hey, what's the difference between a zone, a group, and a scene? Very, again, similar concepts, but the differences are very key to highlight.
And we're going to move on because I want to stay high level on these so we can get to them all. But, there's going to be all sorts of great little pictures, graphics that we've built in to help that conversation be a little easier. I know I'm very visual myself. So let's move on to the next one here. I think we said, if we start with tech terms, the next thing kind of to drill in is maybe these primary control strategies.
Very correct, yeah.
So what do we see right here on the front page? I mean, tell us, what are we reminding folks here?
So we're looking at some very important lighting control strategies that people implement. These are high-end trim, occupancy sensing, and daylight harvesting. So it's great that we dedicate a whole page to them, first and foremost, because a lot of utility programs revolve around how these three concepts are implemented, commissioned, and programmed. So right here, good amount of differences and high level, as well as some detailed nuances that are good to note.
it strikes me that, some folks might think, oh, well, I only need one type of control. I don't actually need all that stuff. So one of the things I like about this learning guide is it shows how those three control strategies all work together. It kind of tells the story. Not only is this great for educating maybe new employees who are learning controls as they talk to customers, it's also great for educating customers. You can explain to them it's not about a single control strategy. It's about all these control strategies working together.
Yeah, and that graphic at the end is great as it does layer everything together and you can tell the story.
The next one I want to talk about is the sequence of operations one. It seems like as soon as we start talking about specific control methods like high-end trim or occupancy, we got to have some sort of way to make sense of it all, right? So what's going on in this sequence of operations learning guide?
So the guide as a whole highlights a few methods of how you can explain how a system is programmed, how a system is going to be controlling the environment it's in. I like to highlight that the sequence of operation concept is even a scope gray area. So one of the key highlights here in this guide is, hey, make this an early conversation. But then it goes on to describe different methods. We have a basic matrix that just says, hey, is the space using a certain control strategy or not? We go into a narrative, and finally we go to a more detailed, although it takes a little bit more time to put together, method, which is just both a narrative and a matrix in itself, paired with a diagram. It just really highlights here's how a system is programmed visually, in narrative, and in a matrix way, so there is no confusion, and anyone from a utility post-install inspector to an implementer can have the conversation and use this as a communication tool for how the system was implemented.
Yeah, that's great. I heard somebody say once, the sequence of operations is how the system designer communicates intent, and it seems like a very valuable tool and resource to have to help manage expectations with all the stakeholders who might be involved. So that's terrific. All right, we're making great time. We're plugging along here. Let's see what comes next. I think we've talked about making sure we're on the same page with tech terms. We talked about these primary control strategies and the sequence of operations. Let's jump down to this one next. This wall station interfaces. This seems a great candidate to follow the conversation because now we're talking about how the tenants are interacting with these lighting systems that are getting installed. We talked about what was the designer's intent, how do you communicate that, and wall stations are really how the tenant is interacting. So tell us what this learning guide is all about.
No, exactly, you're right, John. These people that interface with their lighting system are not going to be lighting professionals or that very lighting knowledgeable at all. These are going to be your nurses, your teachers, your office workers, and the last thing you want is to have a very confusing piece of technology in a wall that they're never going to look at, they're never going to touch. So this guide talks a little bit about how to plan, how to coordinate, and how to understand the different ways that wall stations can be used to interface with the lighting in your environment. It describes some of the major wall station programming types. It talks a little bit about who and how is involved in the planning. And at the very end, it talks a little bit about the decision whether, hey, do you want to have a wall station that uses the power on the wall or a battery operated? So you even have a little bit of those figures and dollars and effort and labor right there.
Yeah, that's terrific. I mean, it's such a good reminder. This is helping inform conversations that are happening throughout the entire supply chain. And this single learning guide on wall stations, you brought up examples of where some of those considerations are directly impacting tenants, right? And that's like what sort of labeling is going to be on those wall stations. What do they need for their space? But you also talked about conversations that need to happen further up the supply chain, like these decisions around a wired solution versus a wireless solution. So again, the resource works for customers. It works for trade allies, design allies, wherever you might be, utility staff included. That's great. I really like that wall stations one. Next, we're going to talk about communicating the value proposition, because I know which one I want to talk about last. So this is kind of order of elimination here. This one's pretty fun. When we put this one together, it really was a great sort of process for our team. So why don't you introduce this one and tee it up for folks?
Sure. The value proposition for network lighting controls is a little different in the sense that savings is not the most attractive way to talk about it. When you implement LED technology into a space, that's where you get the majority of your savings. So anything extra, like controls added to a project like that, savings is not really the calling card. What you want to do is promote the correct features to the correct decision makers. There's going to be a lot of different decision makers in implementing these types of projects, and we highlighted them here: the tenants that live with the space, the building operators, the implementers that are on the other side of the spectrum, and ultimately the building owners or investors. And again, each of this group has their own priorities when it comes to these systems. Understanding what each group, what's important to each group, as well as how to communicate, hey, this system has a solution for that problem or can enhance your current situation. So understanding and being able to categorize is very important.
It's kind of like I call it, you got to unscramble the egg a little bit, right? I know we can't put the egg back together, but you got to unscramble it. It's all too common that both utility folks or even people specifying these systems in the field, we get so excited about the value that we know it can bring to the table, and we can just start talking about it so fast, and it's going to do this and it can do this, while our enthusiasm goes on unabated. It's good to remember that it's going to make for a much better project proposal if you organize your thoughts so that the value proposition inherent in these systems is tied to these specific stakeholder groups. And that's what this learning guide is all about. I think it's really terrific. So again, I'm going to tell you something funny, Armando, and we'll see who's listening to this. Right postage, right address. That's a golf phrase. Typically, what my friends say to me is like, right postage, wrong address. And that means, just I hit the ball in the wrong area. But we try and have fun here at the lab, folks. We hope you're having fun along with us. At the bottom here, we even go so far as to start listing out some of these potential value propositions inherent to the different groups to help jumpstart conversations you might be having out there in the field. All right, so we're making great time, and we've talked about 5, so that means emerging technology trends. Well, this one kind of introduces itself, doesn't it? But Armando, tell us what folks can expect to get out of this.
So we talk about that there is power in the ceiling. With network lighting controls, there's also smart devices in the ceiling. So this guide is basically saying, hey, lighting can be the infrastructure to all of these IoT emerging technologies that can further add value to a space. We're talking about the importance now with all the studies going on about light and health and color tunability. We see how lighting control sensors can be leveraged to understand how a space is used, how people walk in a space, if rooms are empty or not, how to track things that are important to you. And even at the flip side of the page, if you can scroll down to the end of it, we're going to even talk a little bit about, hey, what are the smart city implications? How many additional features can be added to these systems? And it goes hand in hand with the previous guide, because you don't necessarily want to overload any specific decision maker with all these possible features of these emerging technologies.
That's absolutely right. This one is fun. I think all of us as professionals in our respective fields, it's incumbent upon us, it behooves us to always make sure that we're looking forward. And part of looking forward, you get to make fun prognostications about the great things or dangerous things headed our way. How do we navigate those waters? This learning guide is kind of a fun way to kickstart that conversation. The one thing I took out of it is that there really is no end in sight. The trend is only going one direction, and it's going to continue. And the reason I think that's a great note to end on is because sometimes folks say, well, I'm just this simple business, or, I don't run, I'm not a big national chain. Why would I invest in one of these systems? There was a whole bunch of people in the 80s and 90s and even up to 2010 that were saying, why would I ever I don't need a smartphone. I got this flip phone, and I got everything else I need over here. But look where we're at, right? This is a great way to remind folks this technology is coming, and you don't need to be as concerned about maybe some of the risks or overinvestment that might have been keeping you from having the conversation. So it's a great tool. It's really fun. So taking us back out, these tools are all available to the public. Do you think there's value there? My goodness. Who is that made possible by? Well, Seattle City Lighting Design Lab is part of Seattle City Light, and it's also made possible because of our 2020 member utilities. So we want to give a shout out to these guys. We want to say thank you for your support. It certainly means a lot, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention one more time NIA for their support as well. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Armando, Berdiel from Seattle, John Wilson from Portland, signing off. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.